All right, everybody. So we are diving into a story that completely blew up online recently. Brittany Furlan, married to Tommy Lee, had to rescue her little dachshund from a coyote attack in her own backyard. Can you imagine? And they got it all on security footage, the whole thing. But you know what really got us hooked? It wasn't just the Hollywood drama of it all, though don't get me wrong, that's definitely part of it. But this whole thing with Furlan and the coyote, it got us thinking. This whole thing with coyotes, it feels like it's a much bigger deal. Like, they're everywhere, right? In cities, I mean. So that's what we're diving into today, urban coyotes. They're thriving, which I guess good for them, but also kind of terrifying, especially if you're a pet owner, which I am. Oh, and real quick before we get too deep into coyote country, big thanks to topnaturalhealth.com for sponsoring this deep dive. They're all about natural health and wellness solutions, which honestly, who couldn't use a little more of that in their lives? Plus, they've got a special offer just for you, our amazing listeners. Head over to topnaturalhealth.com and use the code DEP at checkout. All right, now where were we? Oh yeah, coyotes setting up shop in our cities. And get this, the data's kind of wild. It turns out you're more likely to have a coyote encounter in a wealthier neighborhood. Yeah, you heard that right. Wealthier neighborhoods, more coyotes. Who knew? It makes you wonder what's going on there, right? Luckily, we've got someone who can help us make sense of all this. Our expert speaker's here to break it all down. They're going to walk us through why this whole coyote city thing is happening, what it means for us city folk just trying to live our lives, and most importantly, what we can do about it. How to stay safe, especially if we've got furry family members to think about.
Yeah, it really is kind of crazy when you think about it, right? This whole urban coyote situation. I mean, we usually picture coyotes out in the wilderness, not strolling down Main Street. But here's the thing. They're incredibly adaptable, way more than we give them credit for. And as cities grow, as we kind of sprawl out into their territory, they're not just disappearing, they're figuring it out, finding ways to survive, even thrive in these concrete jungles we've built. And you know what makes cities so appealing to them? It's not rocket science. They've got easy access to resources. And I'm not just talking about your leftover takeout containers or anything, though let's be real, that probably doesn't hurt. But think about it. More rodents, rabbits, all the things coyotes love to snack on, those populations tend to boom in cities too. It's like a buffet for coyotes. They're drawn to the relative safety, all the nooks and crannies to hide in. And, of course, the readily available food in those nice manicured urban green spaces we love so much. It's like a win-win for them,
And you mentioned something before about wealthier neighborhoods and more coyote sightings. It's kind of a weird connection, isn't it? Like, you'd think it'd be the opposite, right?
Yeah, it's counterintuitive for sure. But it really comes down to those resources we were talking about. Think about what those wealthier areas often have. Bigger properties, more space in general, often more green space, parks, those beautifully landscaped yards. And let's be honest, people in those areas might be, I don't know, a little less strict about cleaning up every last crumb of pet food, maybe?
Yeah.
Or they got those fancy compost bins that are basically, well, they're like coyote magnets, if we're being honest.
Okay, yeah. That's definitely making me rethink my composting situation. But this is starting to freak me out a little, not gonna lie. I've got a dog, a terrier mix. She's a sweetheart, but she's no match for a coyote. So seriously, what can people actually do to protect their pets?
Yeah, I hear you. It's one thing to talk about this stuff in the abstract, but when it's your own furry friend on the line, it gets real, right? The good news is there are definitely things you can do. Practical steps to keep your pet safe. First and foremost, supervision is key, especially at dawn and dusk. That's prime coyote time. If your dog's out then, keep him on a leash.
That seems pretty basic, but I guess you'd be surprised how many people don't do that. But even then, our yards aren't exactly Fort Knox, you know what I mean?
Exactly. So let's talk about fencing. If you're serious about keeping coyotes out, you want a fence that's at least 6 feet high. And here's the thing most people don't think about. It needs to go underground too. Coyotes are diggers. They'll find a way under if they can. You can even get these things called coyote rollers. They go on top of your fence and make it nearly impossible for anything to climb over.
Coyote rollers! See, I learn something new every time we do one of these deep dives. You know what else I found out about when I was doing some research for this? Coyote vests.
Oh, yeah. You mean those things that are like spiked armor for your dog?
Yeah. Have you seen those? They're kind of intense.
They are pretty wild. I mean, I get it. You got to do what you got to do to protect your pup. They're not a guarantee or anything, but they can definitely give your dog a fighting chance.
Yeah. Right. It's like the canine equivalent of a bulletproof vest. Extreme times call for extreme fashion, I guess.
Something like that. But it's not just about the physical barriers,
Yeah.
Understanding coyote behavior is a huge part of this. They're not just mindless eating machines, They're They're smart. They've got their own social structures, instincts, all of that. And one thing to keep in mind, especially during breeding and denning season, so springtime, basically. That's when they're most likely to be territorial, a little more on edge.
So, like, extra cautious in the spring. Got it. Springtime. Got it. Make a note of that.
Yeah. It's always good to be extra careful that time of year. And, here's the thing about coexisting with wildlife, any kind of wildlife. It takes work. It takes vigilance. And not just from us, from them, too. Like coyotes, they're not just reacting to us individually. They're learning from each other, even teaching their young. So if a neighborhood is really good at hazing, those techniques to kind of discourage coyotes from getting too comfortable, they'll probably see fewer conflicts in the long run.
Hazing. Right. I've heard that word before. But what does that actually look like? Like, am I supposed to stand on my porch and yell at them to get off my lawn?
You could try that, but I'm not sure how effective it would be. The most effective hazing is all about being. Well, think big, loud, unpredictable. Things like air horns, those can be really effective. Or shaking a can full of coins, that kind of thing. Some people even spray them with a hose if they get too close. The point is to startle them, make them feel unwelcome, reinforce the idea that being around humans is a bad time.
Man, I'm telling you, every time we do one of these deep dives, I learn so much. There's always more to it than you think, It's not just about keeping coyotes out. It's about understanding them.
100%. And that's what's so powerful about someone like Brittany Furlan sharing her story. She's got this huge platform, right? So even though her experience was scary, she's getting people talking, making them think about these issues, which is so important.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder, though. Can we ever really truly coexist with coyotes in our cities? Like, is that even possible?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? And then honestly, I don't think there's an easy answer. But here's what I will say. It's not about eradication. It's about understanding. We need to understand their behavior, respect their place in the ecosystem, and most importantly, take responsibility for our own actions. We can't just expect them to disappear.
You're so right. This whole deep dive has really been eye-opening, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are feeling the same way. So tell us about your experiences. Have you had any close encounters with urban wildlife? Any questions we didn't answer? Head over to our socials and let's keep this conversation going. And a huge thank you to our expert speaker today. You've given us so much to think about. And to everyone listening, don't forget to check out topnaturalhealth.com. Use the code DEP at checkout for some special natural goodness. Just for you, our amazing listeners. We'll catch you on our next deep dive.